Real quick, before we start this podcast episode, I just want to say thank you for tuning into the Marc Colcer podcast. I know you've got a million things that you could be doing right now, and the fact that you're taking time out of your day to watch this podcast episode truly means the world to me, and I just want to say thank you for that. If you'd like to continue to support the podcast, right below this video, if you could hit the subscribe button, and then, hey, if you got some more time and you want to hit the download button, the comment button, the like button, the share button, any of those buttons, it's greatly, greatly appreciated. It helps for other people to find out about the podcast, and it helps for you to be notified about future episodes. So if you guys could take a quick second, hit the subscribe button, I would really appreciate that. Outside of that, this episode and every other episode is brought to you guys by Roast Umber Coffee. As some of you guys know, I co-founded Roast Umber Coffee, and we have the greatest farmers in Guatemala and Honduras and the greatest roaster in Grand Rapids, Michigan, all to bring you guys the greatest cup of coffee possible. So if you'd like to try it out, go to our website, use the coupon code MARC30, and you're going to get 30% off your coffee. Now on to the episode. Thank you guys again for tuning in.
All right, dude, we got to start off this podcast with the question that everybody wants to know the answer to. Tell me how much you hate Frank DeGods.
Where do I begin?
Welcome to the Marc Colcer podcast.
Dude, welcome to the podcast. How we doing, brother?
Doing great, man. Thanks for having me.
Dude, glad to have you here. We've been shooting the shit for the last few hours, and this has been first off, love that, enjoy that. But I'm also excited to just because we've been talking about just our thoughts on the space and everything that's happening right now and all of that. And so I'm excited to dive more into that on the podcast. I'm excited to dive into the background of Scum because, dude, I'm not an art guy. Let me clarify. I can't describe art. Some people will look at something and be like, the contemporary design of the... I can't do that. I look at something and I'm like, I either like it or I don't like it. And that's how my brain works, right? So I remember seeing your art for the first time and just being like, I fucking love this. I can't tell you why I love it. I can't describe it, but I love it. And that's how I look at all art, right? And so I've been excited to have you on the podcast, learn about your journey, how you got to the position that you're in right now. But for people who don't know who you are, can you give a 30-second intro to yourself?
Yes, my name is Scum. I sell art on the Solana blockchain. I've worked with some of the biggest projects on Solana, now on ETH. There's now Scum on Marc's couch, and we got all the hot takes out earlier. So you're getting nice, friendly Scum for the next hour of your life.
There we go. You guys are going to have to subscribe to my friend tech, and you guys can hear all the uncut version of this podcast. No, I'm just kidding. Don't do that. But yeah, man. So let's dive into your whole background. So when you were walk me through, when did you get into the creative field to begin with? When did you start creating art? Everything like that. Walk me through all of that, and take me back as far back as you want to. I want to get into your whole life journey.
Okay. I mean, I've been drawing since I was a baby. I think I have some really, really early formative memories. When I was very, very young, my dad went to prison, but when he came back, he brought all of this art back with him. So I just have this very early, very distinct idea that being creative in whatever circumstance was really important. It was really important to him. He brought back drawings, these really cool sculptures. He had his own little hustle when he was in there. And he just inspired the shit out of me. Me and my cousins always drew. We'd have little art competitions. I always liked to draw aliens and space battles. And that evolved into me wanting to get into digital art more. When I was 14 or 15, my grandpa gave me a IBM, an old crusty IBM ThinkBook with Photoshop 2 on it. And I told everybody I wanted to learn how to do graphic design, but what I really wanted to do was learn how to make stencils. And it was really easy to create separations and stuff on Photoshop. So from 15, I'm 34 now, for 20 years, I've been using the Adobe suite. So I have a lot of experience with everything Adobe, but, from about 15 on, I was doing graffiti with some of my friends. We lived in a rural part of Arizona. So, it was canals and street signs, and we didn't have buildings. I didn't really get to get that experience until I grew up a little bit and I moved into Tucson proper. We were in this really dusty rural area just outside of Tucson. So it was BMX bikes. Nobody skateboarded because there was no sidewalks. But anyway, after I got arrested the first time, I decided I didn't like what handcuffs feel like. I got really into stickers and markers, and I loved doing characters, but I decided that I was done. Like the life of crime wasn't for me anymore. That translated into me trying to do freelance design for a while. I did actually love graphic design, just like through symbiosis of just like experimenting with Photoshop, experimenting with Adobe Illustrator. And then so when I was in my early 20s, I tried to roll that into like a freelance business, but having not had any like formal education, not really knowing how to run a business, not knowing how to manage clients, I burnt out really quickly. And that kind of sat on the back burner. And then I was in restaurants for a really long time. I don't think not a lot of people know it, but I was like a very competitive cocktail bartender, not like flair bartending, but I was like the bow tie and suspenders bartender. It was like, so I started in sushi as a chef. I was back house for a long time. That translated directly into the type of bartending that was popular at the time, which was like very high end, very clean bartending. The sort of competitions were around like cleanliness and like how you were using ingredients that were endemic to your region. Like all of my friends were like level 1 or 2 sommeliers. I've been to Cuba to visit Havana Club. I've been to distilleries all over Mexico, distilleries all over the United States. I did a lot of like travel. I learned about the world and history through booze. But in that process, I became a small sweat equity shareholder of a restaurant group that I was in. And through the entire process, I was designing their menus. I was doing food photography. I was helping with branding. I branded some of their new concepts. And then that all came to a head when I decided to get sober. So I've been sober now for like 4.5 years. But being in restaurants, being in bars, and being sober don't really mix. So I had this like kind of dramatic evolution. I went from like booze was my identity, traveling for booze, and the people that I hung out with were all involved in the restaurant industry, and people who are in the industry like it's very incestuous. Everybody moves around. People move to the same restaurants. You all know the same owners. But I had to get out. So I had this like, I worked in a climbing gym for a little while. I was like, I took my little bit of equity and I just like started over kind of. And it was probably around the beginning of the pandemic when I decided to get back into trying to pursue design and art to pay my bills. And I kind of just jumped in with both feet. I had a couple of clients sort of on the side, the previous restaurants that I'd worked with, plenty of people who were knocking. I just wasn't answering. And I decided I would just go for it. And for about the 3 years leading up to Web3, I was a freelance graphic designer. I paid all my bills. It's how I was able to travel and rock climb, which is a big part of my life. But through design, brand identity, building brand packages, understanding social media, understanding just communication and how to take a business from brick and mortar to an online presence. Those are all things that like every business was trying to pursue during the pandemic. So I was building websites. I was managing social media. I was doing portraiture, photography. I was doing food photography. I was doing graphic design. And I think that toolbox really helped when I got into Web3 because I never stopped drawing the entire time, but I just came to the space with a lot of tools for how to communicate what my vision was, or just even what I was thinking at the time. Like communication was just so front of mind for me for years, really. And it's served me well in this space specifically, just being able to talk about myself and my vision and my goals.
Dude, that's epic. Like you're a man of many journeys. Like that's a crazy, crazy life story. I love that. So thanks. How did you end up getting then like red pilled into NFTs and everything like that?
So my former mentor, he's this really cool dude. He's from this like pretty wealthy family from the border, from Nogales. He's a restaurateur, but he's also like, he studied architecture abroad. He does commercial development. He does restaurants. He's really passionate about restaurants, but he knows the money's in commercial development. And we shared an office space for the whole pandemic. And he put me on game a lot. Like he taught me about so much business wise. He really let me in, pulled the curtain back, showed me what was what. And we were doing another late night. The office was dope. I just wanted to like, every wall was corkboard. If we had like a new concept that we were going to be launching, we would take an entire wall, clear it, and we would just build a brand. On the wall, he always had like the coolest taste. Anyway, I came to the office one day and he was just like, I think you should look into NFTs. At the time he was going to try to build his entire business structure because he was trying to go for a co-op. He was essentially trying to build a DAO as a restaurant. He was going to put ownership of the entire restaurant on chain. That was his goal at the time. I don't know if he's pursued it since, because maybe 3 months after he told me to look into NFTs, I quit all my clients because I just fallen so deep down the rabbit hole. I mean, I started selling art, which I didn't think I was going to be able to do when I got into the space, but started with podcasts. I minted my first rug on ETH. I moved to Solana. I minted my second rug on Solana. And then I got into like DTP, DAA, that like universe. And I did like my first fan art that's all I was trying to do. I just picked up the iPad and was drawing a panda. And that community really catapulted me into like, I have DAA to thank, really, sincerely. Like that community really like lifted me up, gave me all of the like confidence and really put the wind in my sails. But yeah, he red pilled me. I kind of did all the work myself. And I think, he's not stoked about it, but I ended up quitting like very quickly afterwards, maybe 2 or 3 months after.
You got to do what you got to do. So had you at that point, had you ever sold any of your art? Because, it sounds like you were doing a lot of graphic design and branding work and things like that. But had you ever actually sold your own pieces?
No.
Oh, wow. So your first ever pieces were digital pieces.
Yeah.
That's super, super, super cool.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I mean, becoming an artist and trying to understand what it means to be an artist, like everyone has their own journey. I'm sure I'm just learning what mine is. It's interesting to learn what that is in this environment where everything is a speculative asset and everyone is banking on you winning, and everyone has such like access to you as an individual. I don't know it any other way, so I'm sure this will be like a really interesting study, like in 8 years when I finally like have a grasp on this and I've talked to enough artists, like what their journey was leading into Web3, what it's been after. But yeah, I'm sure that like my formative years as an artist are much different than others, I mean, sure, I've been an artist my entire life. I've loved to draw. I'm an illustrator, whatever, but becoming like an artist who pays their bills with their art, that happened on chain.
Yeah, that's very, very cool. So, okay, so walk me through like, what was it like for you going from like, okay, you're creating these pieces for brands and things like that, and so that's what the spotlight is on, the brand. You are building things on the back end, but you are not the thing in the spotlight, right? To now in the NFT space, you are the spotlight, right? Like for your art to kind of keep gaining the notoriety that it's looking for, like at the same time, your name has to grow, right? And so what is that like for you going from you are building things for somebody else who's in the spotlight to now you are building things and you are in the spotlight? What was that like for you personally?
I mean, honestly, it's an internal dialogue constantly, really. I mean, I love the idea of like beautiful communication via design. And the phrase like good design is invisible. I really like loud design. Like I like really loud, chunky design. I like impact font, but in terms of myself becoming the branded thing, it's nice because Scum is different from like Matt. Like I'm Matt. Scum is this like presence on the internet. And like in a lot of ways, I would like for Scum and his art to be very, very famous, but I really would like to retain the privacy of like who I am as an individual. Like celebrity's less appealing to me, I think. And so I've tried to avoid being like a super active content creator. Like I don't want to do the TikToks and the reels and the stuff like that. Like I would love it if I could just put all of my attention and energy into art and that does all the speaking for me. And if I can do a good job of communicating via what I've learned through branding and media and advertising, great. That's a bit of a convoluted answer. I think I'm still figuring it out, honestly. sincerely.
Yeah. I mean, I think we're all trying to figure this shit out, right? Like, it's like, again, it's like we're still all so new to this space. So there's still a lot of growing pains. It's figuring out kind of what you want your identity to be in this space and how you want to navigate it. And then also pivoting, because there's times that like you change your mind on things because that's human nature. But okay, so getting back more into your art, where did your style come from to begin with?
To begin with, man, I mean, as a kid, like I said, I think it was just me and my cousins kind of trying to one up each other, but secretly kind of stealing each other's steez. He was really heavily influenced by like manga. I really loved Todd McFarlane. Like I was just a Spawn maxi as a kid. So I guess comic books. I was also I played some tabletop games. I played Warhammer. So like that was like very painterly, high rendered images of like battles happening. But later it evolved. I think in like the years leading up to getting into the space, I was very heavily influenced by Mobius. And you've seen like there's other artists who do that style extremely well. John Lay has his own. Killian Ang is another that I really, really look up to. But I think I just realized that I had just kind of a steep passion for rendering. I just love to like pack in a lot of details, which is pretty incongruent with the Moebius style. So I think I really love the subject matter, the sort of like ethereal, gigantic landscapes and the stories that are told or you tell yourself by looking at those images. Like those are things that I love experiencing Moebius's art. But I began to be influenced by Jamie Hewlett, and other artists in the space for sure. Like people who I really look up. I mean, again, I really look up to John. I love Hyblinks' work. Scuba, love Scuba.
Shout out Scuba.
But these are just like people who were like with me and around me in the beginning at a formative time when I was, learning stuff. And then also like I would be lying if I didn't say that I learned a lot working with Candy and Johnny on DeadGods. Like I had never drawn that much for that extended period of time in my life. So I think a lot of what I have now came from those 1,000 hours in the basement drawing DeadGods.
There we go. Yeah, we'll definitely get into that. But my question for you is, so going from somebody who is doing art, for the passion and everything like that, and you talked about as a kid, like getting into Photoshop 2 and all these different things. How does it make you feel then when your work starts to be, I guess, speculated on, and now all of a sudden like you sell one piece for X amount of dollars and then you sell another piece for X amount of dollars, and like does that affect the way that you look at your work of like, oh well, this one sold for this and then this one just sold for this and maybe it's less now? Is that like, how do you keep that from becoming like a negative to you of like your work having different pricing values, even though like to you it may mean something completely else besides the price?
It's maybe kind of a complicated answer to a simple question, but I honestly don't let the price affect how I value the art at all. I know that I'm years away from the mastery that I want to have on my craft. I have another at least 8,000 hours to pack into this thing before I feel like I'm anywhere near who I want to be as an artist. So generally, as I finish a piece, I'm ready to move on to the next piece because it's another opportunity to hone this thing that I'm trying to be. I fully expect to hit a plateau here at some point, and I think that's where in any pursuit worth pursuing, there's going to be a period where if you don't just have natural talent and you're just a hard worker, you're going to hit this period where growth doesn't come as quickly, and that's where the mastery happens. And I'm prepared and I'm looking forward to that period, but in terms of how it's valued, I think like the market has determined a lot of that. Who I've been associated with, and sort of the success that I've had is a snowball, right? Like people see things that are valuable and assign value to them. Whether or not like my art is more valuable than another artist's isn't for me to say, and I don't often agree with it. It has to do with like the market and how the market exists and how people value art based on what they think it's going to be worth in the future. I sincerely just want people to buy my art because they love it and they're willing to take a complete loss on it. Granted, like, I have been in the space and I do think there's a lot of levers you can pull as an artist to make it fun and have access to you and your community be something that's worthwhile for them. To avoid any language that makes it sound like security. I think, there's things you can do as a community that you couldn't do pre-Web3. And it's not that those mechanisms didn't exist. Like, Discord was there, Twitter was there. We all could have done this, but for some reason, blockchain has created this interesting marketing, like, it's a bomb. Like, I can make a piece of art. I can make 20 pieces of art attached to 20 individuals who will all come and congregate in one space because I'm in it. And then because I have that direct connection with them, they can be voices for me in this space. And I think it's still an untapped thing and really the superpower of the space. Wow, that was a complete tangent. My bad.
No, I love it. It's cool to see how your brain works on that. And yeah, and I mean, I completely agree. I think it's one of those things where people who then buy your art I feel like with Web3, you feel more connected to the artist than you would if you just went to an art gallery and just bought art, right? Like, I feel like there's something different with, you go on Twitter and you see, okay, Scum just dropped a new Slimes piece. Like, oh, this is crazy. I want that. And then, you have the ability to tweet the person who just created it. Like, that's a very, very cool connection that you otherwise don't have. Once again, if you just go to a gallery, you see a piece and you like it and you buy it, you don't have that natural connection to the artist that you do in Web3.
Yeah.
And to other collectors.
I mean, but people, a lot of times, like, really high value art is bought for, it's either a store of value or it's clout, right? Like, you hang it in your house because you want to show your guests. Or you put it in a temperature controlled room because it's a store of value and historically it's traded well. But in this case, my art is living. Like, people are wearing my art on Twitter and interacting with each other. And we're actively making plans about, like, who we can interact with and what we can do as fans of this art. It's fucking cool.
Yeah, it's very, very cool. So, okay, so walk me through the kind of the art process for you. Like, when you where do your ideas come from in terms of, like, if let's say you put out a piece and then you're like, okay, it's time to start working on the next piece. Like, walk me through, what does that creative process look like?
Well, so I think one of the things that's helped me coming from doing a lot of client work is I really like having a direction. And to connect those dots, I think, like, I realized the reason why I burned out when I was 20 doing client work is because I never created a brief, meaning I never created bumpers for myself or the client. And I wasn't asking questions that either they hadn't thought of or that I thought of too late. So things inevitably go off the rails, right? Like, you make decisions or you take directions that don't have to do with the core thesis or the core idea. And it's why you might have a project that is delayed for 8 months. Like, you might not have, like, the parameters in line from the beginning. So when I started Slimes, it was an offshoot of a collection called Maquina Muertes that I have been conceptualizing since March of 2022. It's been in the back of my head. I've been writing about it. I've been creating sketches. I've been reading a lot about the subject matter for months and months and months. And then last year in October, I took a complete month off. My partner and I went to Spain. We rock climbed along the coast. We went to Breakpoint. We drove back. We lived in an RV in Spain for a month. And the entire time, all I did was I did no real output. I did nothing to completion. I just did sketches and I wrote stories and I created word marks and I created ideas and I wrote things down while trying to do as much research as possible. And because of that, like, sort of brainstorming session that lasted a full month, I have parameters now for whenever I create a new piece inside this collection. And so everything is heavily influenced by Mexican American culture and Mexican indigenous culture, pre-Columbian culture, whether that's Aztec, Maya, Olmec. I'm pulling inspiration from all of these motifs that I don't think get much representation, and that I think are really fucking cool. So to answer your question now, when I finish a piece and it's time to do the next one, I have like I have like 10,000 pins on my Pinterest board. I pull a lot of different ideas. If there's like one aspect, if there's like a lighting effect that I really enjoy, or there's a fit that I really like, or a pose, I'm pulling from like human photography. I'm pulling from other artists. I have this like large Pinterest board, and I could just kind of go in and check and see like, is there an idea that sparks my imagination? And then I'll get to sketching. And generally speaking, I don't have an idea when I start, but I have parameters in mind. So it's really easy to get to an end goal that seems to fit with the overall theme. But because I'm creating a new character every single time, if you look at one right next to the other, sometimes they look like they're maybe not from the same collection, but you look at all of them together and I think it tells a story.
That's very cool. So, okay, so then when you have times that you need to just like mentally recharge, because I got to imagine it's like, it's hard to be creative all the time, right? So when you need to recharge, what's your go-to things? You mentioned rock climbing. What else do you like? When did you get into rock climbing?
I got into rock climbing in like, man, I was probably 22, 23. I just walked into a gym one day. I think I was going through a breakup or something, and I like wanted to do something extreme, and it stuck. It became like it saved my life. Like it replaced like drugs and alcohol when I got sober. I went deep. Like I've climbed in Norway, I've climbed in Cuba, I've climbed in Mexico, I've climbed all over the United States. I've done a lot of establishing. I've climbed up to 13 plus. Like I have a pretty great like record. Web3 hit, fucking wiped it out. I'm ready to get back to it. But yeah, I mean, climbing's one of them. To be honest, man, I haven't really taken a break since the Spain trip nearly a year ago. I feel like I've been on a wave, and I'm learning how to surf, and I'm not fucking it up, but it's stressful, and I can't bail because it's a big one, you know? So I'm ready for a break. When I'm on breaks is when I have like my really good ideas. And so I'm due for one. But in the meantime, like I go to the gym at least 6 days a week. I go on walks, meditate. I make sure to get 8 hours of sleep. When I wake up, I take cold showers. Like I do a lot of little maintenance things, but none of it really replaces the like truly connect and like, you know, turn your brain off for 3 or 4 days. I haven't done that in almost a year.
Damn, you're due for one.
I'm due.
But no, man, it's yeah, again, it feels like we're in uncharted territory. And so as a result, it's like you don't want to take your foot off the gas a little bit because you want to like keep making moves in this space. You want to keep growing and learning and everything like that. But no, it's just been, again, it's been really fun as a fan to watch your journey and to watch you grow. Because I remember, again, when I first started seeing Scum pieces, and I was like, dude, these are fucking crazy. And then I remember the excitement of when it was announced that you were going to be working on the DeadGod art, and it was like everybody was just super excited for it. And so I do want to dive into that a little bit, because obviously, you know, we started off this podcast for everybody. Like we started off with some clickbait. We had to have a little fun with you guys. But I wanted to dive into.
Frank. Just kidding. I love you.
I wanted to dive into that a little bit of like, first off, like how did that come to be? How did you begin working with the team on DeadGod art?
I mean, shout out Taylor DeGods. I met a friend, Steven Yuan, shout out Steven. He owns the Ormus and Gobi Labs. And he was the first person to reach out to me. The first piece of art that I posted, he reached out and was like, you could probably sell art. And I was like, fuck off. And he was like, no, I'm for real. And I was like, I still don't believe you. And then obviously I released a first collection. It was, at the time, derivatives were hot. I was just making art. But I did a series of 9 pieces. I had approval from Monolith. My entire goal with the 9 pieces was to hopefully get close enough to buying a degenerate ape, which at the time, like, it was a really expensive NFT. And I think my ambitions were only as large as like buy an expensive NFT so I can like use it as my PFP on Twitter. And I think by like the second auction, I had like gone over that. I had like made enough to get an ape, and things just were wild. Like I had a piece that was auctioned live at a hacker house in Seattle, like my 4th piece that I'd ever sold in my life, you know, it was being auctioned on stage at this like Solana event. But Taylor DeGods reached out. I guess he'd seen my art and asked if I would do the Olympus, like the splash page for their website, because they were doing DeGods week. And I think at the time they were like, can you do this in 4 days? Of course, like they delayed a bunch of shit. So I think in like 5 days, I put like 40 hours into this piece. Like I just like from morning to night, I was like tweaking, and I'd never done any architecture. I'd never even really worked in perspective. I was like learning how to draw this thing as I was drawing it. And it's still cool. Like they made like a huge 3D rendering out of it. And they were at one point it was going to be its own little metaverse, but, that was my like intro to the team. And then after that I had like the call with Frank, and Frank was like, bro, it's fire. Like, bro, you get it. And like he docs and stuff. So I never docs for anybody. And it was cool. Cause like the way Frank makes you feel is like very hype, very special. And like, you're just sharing this like moment. That's like how a lot of moments with Frank are. And so I was sold. And so they invited me out to, Palm Springs. They had this big ass Airbnb, and it was so funny. So I was supposed to go out there for 3 days. We were going to do DeadGods in 3 or 4 days.
That's a little bit, that is bold.
It was so I drive out there by myself. I get to the house, and there's some fucking guy like meditating on the lawn, and it's this big ass like Palm Springs house. It's beautiful. And he's like, hey man, how are you? It turns out it's Taylor. Hey man, how are you? Let me introduce you to everybody. I go inside, and it's just like Candy and Johnny, big ass pile of candy, vapes everywhere. Everyone's like, I think like Frank had still not woken up. It was like 1 PM or something. It was just like, I got there and I was like, fuck man, this is crazy. This is wild. Like I'd never really experienced anything like it. Like these were a bunch of really young dudes. And like the more you started to talk to each of them, you realized that they were all brilliant in their own right. And they were doing this thing that really felt like a moment. Like it felt like a wave. And while I was at the house, they hit 33 sold. Like me and Candy were sitting on different couches. We just met each other, and everyone was watching the floor price. They were doing a spaces or something, and we were like kind of looking at each other. And we bought the like 29 soul and then the 31 soul so that it would hit 33. And so we were like, giving each other fist bumps. And like, I had just learned what 33.3 was, cause I wasn't there for mint. Like I wasn't early DeGods. And so it was just electric. And obviously we know how that story ends, 5 months later, 10 Airbnbs later, me, Johnny and Candy are, basically siblings at that point, and we make DeadGods together.
Okay. So walk me through when you guys started working on the DeadGod art, because to me, the art, like you guys began the art refresh meta, or like the art upgrade meta and everything like that. Right. And I remember because I was an OG minter of DeGods, and one of the things that always held me back to buying more DeGods was I looked at the art, the original art, and I was like, God, I just don't fuck with this. Like it just did nothing for me. Mind you, again, I don't have that artistic brain that can like look at it and like think deeper with it. I just look at it and I go, I fuck with it or I don't, right? What I loved about DeGods at the beginning was the mentality of like, it seemed like this like group of people that really just wanted everybody to succeed. And they kind of had this attitude of like, if you hated on it, like kind of fuck yourself, right? And I love that mindset of like, hey, we're going to figure this out. Yes, when we fuck up, we're going to own it, and but like, if you're rooting against us, like, then all you're going to do is watch us succeed, because we're going to figure it out and we're going to keep moving up, right? And I love that whole mindset. And so, when they first started kind of teasing the DeadGod art, I was like, this is different, right? And then when it eventually came out, I remember just thinking to myself, like, it was an electric time period of just being on Twitter, and there was the one specific Twitter account where you would like see, a new DeadGod being created, right? And it was just like, I remember sharing those constantly, right? Like, this is crazy. Like, look how this one went from this to this. Like, that is so nuts, right? And so what was that like for you guys? Like taking this art and kind of going, hey, we've got this kind of like mediocre art to begin with. Love you, Johnny. I apologize for calling your art a mediocre, but like the original art, just kind of, obviously it was impossible to know what they were creating at the time, right? And they go from that to the DeadGod art. Walk me through, like, what did you guys have in mind when you guys were creating that?
So yeah, I think like to clear the air, because there's a lot of like misconception, like that was very much Johnny's baby, right? Like DeadGods was his vision, his baby. When I came on, I was actually surprised. Everybody had it. I don't know. I mean, it felt like it was Johnny's baby because he defended a lot of the design decisions. And he felt like for him too, it was sort of his, like, it was his redemption arc, because he wasn't totally bought in on the NFT space, but he did make DeGods, and he didn't like the idea that like that was the art that represented him. So he was ready to do this upgrade, but everyone else was so involved and like so interested in how to make the art better. Like Frank had a lot of input, Taylor had a lot of input, which always surprised me. I assumed that it was going to be like, there's this artist and he's making all the decisions. And you know, we got a little tribal. Like we'd always, like, as the artist, we'd defend Johnny's ideas. When Johnny went off the rails a little bit, we'd have to defend someone else's ideas. It ended up becoming like, you know, everybody had their input, but, it was cool. I mean, it was like, we just had to take a trait, tell a story about why it's dead now at its specific rarity. We sort of had different metrics, but, we just had to make it new and interesting and exciting. And I mean, I think that's why people like that art. Like even after it was done, sometimes I would look at it and be like, man, this is a lot. But I think people love that they could just zoom in and see that we literally did take a lot of these traits, like me as an artist, Candy as an artist, Johnny as an artist, and like make one-on-ones out of them. Like we tried to pack, I mean, it was like we didn't really talk about being competitive, but I feel like we kind of were. Like traits did all pass between each other. Like I'd pass the trait to Candy, he'd finish it up, or vice versa. Everything would kind of flow through Johnny. He'd put the finishing little details on it. But man, I totally lost my train of thought.
So here's my question based off that. How difficult was that environment to work in? And the reason why I say that is because I do think about, like, if you just take a shit ton of really talented people and put them together, it's almost like when you look at like sports teams, right? When anytime anybody says like, oh, this team is a super team, usually the super teams don't work out because it's all of these really giga talented people all put together, but everybody has their own ideas because they've already been successful in their own right. And so you bring all those people together and you want them to work cohesively, but that's really, really difficult to do when you're trying to get all these really, really talented people to work together instead of working on an individual aspect. And I do feel like when I think about art, to me, it is very individual, right? It's a lot of like you're sitting at your computer or iPad or whatever, and you're working on something, and it is very individualistic. And then all of a sudden it's like, hey, now you're working on one thing all together, but everybody has their own ideas and everybody's been successful in their own right. So it's like, hey, we all have to come together when we've probably never really had to do that before. So I imagine that's really difficult to work in, or am I throwing ideas out there?
No, I was just I was still humble then. I think since then I got a little bit of an ego on me. I think I'm harder to work with now than I was then. I hadn't clocked the hours, and that was a brand new environment for me. And I'd never really worked on a team before, like all through design, doing graffiti shit. Like there's all kind of solo sports, rock climbing, like for the most part, like I like to work alone. And I am my own biggest critic, and I think I have a pretty decent eye. So like I trust myself, but this was the first time that I worked in an environment where I had to be iterative and I had to like swallow my pride and get feedback. And I think I knew that I needed that, like really, really needed that. And it's made me a better artist in a lot of ways. I'm a little bit more selective, but I definitely ask for a lot more feedback now. That's helped me in my creative process. But to answer your question directly, at the time, it wasn't that bad. Like I definitely everyone had their periods where they needed to fucking walk outside, right? Like things got heated. We all have different ideas. And like you said, we all have our own ideas of what is good art. But I think that never really came into play until Duppies, until Utes. I think like at that point there were so many fucking cooks in the kitchen, and like I felt like I could stand on my own. We had Pencils, who could stand on his own, Candy, who could stand on his own, Johnny, who actually came way later. Like, it was just Candy and I for like 5 months. Johnny came later. And then you throw John Lay in there. And like, I think if you have context for John Lay, I was stoked. I was like, I want to learn everything I can from this person. And then you have some other people who maybe aren't as like plugged into the space, who don't have the same reverence. And so like, there's all of these like competing strong personalities and egos. And yeah, that was a tough period for sure.
Yeah, I felt like, so on my end of things, I see, DeadGods comes out. It's universally loved by everybody, right? And we start to see one of the like biggest rips in NFTs of, floor price goes from, DeGods were like less than $1,000 at the beginning of 2022 to, I think at the peak they hit $36,000, something along those lines, right? A wild come up in like 5 or 6 months, right? And after that, it gets announced that Duppies is going to be the next thing, right? And that gets speculated on very quickly. We have the birth of Nippies, and shout out to Scuba for that.
Shout out Scuba.
And and so we start to see kind of this like fan art coming out around like what people think Duppies is going to be. It gets announced of kind of like we've got the squad coming together to create this art, and everybody's speculating how crazy it's going to be, everything like that. And so then I want to say at some point over the summer, the idea of Duppies is scratched. It becomes Utes. And so, yeah, walk me through what was that like? And I guess, like, did you guys, how difficult is that to kind of go, hey, we just created something that was so universally loved, but there was really no pressure, I guess, at that time, because it was like we were all, everybody in the NFT space, in my opinion, I'm just going to put this out there. Some people would disagree. It is what it is. I will say, I think people, up until DeadGods came out, I think people in the NFT space were used to really mid art. And then all of a sudden DeadGods comes out and everybody's like, holy shit, the bar just got raised in terms of like what we expect, right? And to me, it felt like, okay, so when they're creating, originally Duppies, then it becomes Utes. Even me as somebody who's, I'm not involved obviously in the art process or the team or anything like that. I'm looking at it and I'm like, man, I know they're going to kill it, but boy, they got like a hell of a, equation to solve here of like, we have to create this collection that everybody wants after we just absolutely crushed DeadGods. And now the bar is so high in terms of like what people expect and what they're going to be happy with. And everybody in the NFT space has their own ideas and what they think needs to be done. And everybody's a chief and we don't have enough idiots. And so walk me through, what was that like for you guys creating something that is being so talked about and speculated on and everything along those lines?
It was interesting. It happened very quickly after DeadGods, like more quickly than I think people understand. I was home for 2 weeks, I think, when I got the call that we were going to start working on something else. Go out to LA. And that's actually where I met Odablem, who is he's half of Slimes now. Odablem's my boy. Shout out Odablem. He's about to get married next week. Love you, dog.
Sir.
We start working on a project, like an expansion of this universe. And at the time, Johnny had burnt out. He had done DeadGods, and I think he was done. He felt like he was done. He took some time off, which I'm really glad he did. Like, that was a push. I saw what it did to him, and I'm glad he took the time. But so it just kind of left me and Candy to figure this thing out. Now, I don't know. You've spent a lot of time with Frank, and I can't remember who. I think it was actually John who coined this. But being able to speak Rohanese comes in handy when you're interacting with Frank. Like, he moves a mile a minute. He changes his ideas a lot. He has a lot of really high level ideas that he's very passionate about, but can shift ideas really quickly if presented with a really good one. And just not how my brain works. So we started with a different goal. I won't get into what the goals were. We started with different goals than where we ultimately ended. And I think the biggest thing to take away is that we took it less seriously in the beginning than we did in the end. And I think a function of that is just how long it took. And what I think we did right was we did our best as a team, a really large team, to meet a lot of expectations, like in terms of production value, presentation, the run up to the release, all these things. Like, I think we could have released fucking anything. And at the time, the sentiment was so good that people would have taken, like if we'd released 4 months earlier, we could have released much worse art and people still would have loved it. And people would still be talking about how it's really great. But we didn't. So it had to progressively get better as time went on. We had to take it more seriously. And we had to overthink it for like 3 months or so. But the videos that Frank was making, the Tube website, the mechanics of everything, like all of that was so fucking cool and fun and interactive that I think it really made the Utes launch like pretty impressive. And like when you fucking pop your tube, that like animation they did and the sound, like that was sick. All of that. I opened all my tubes when I was in Lisbon, and I was sick and I swiftly floored everything. But I was hyped. It was beautiful. It was a beautiful thing. But yeah, I mean, it was a lot of pressure, for sure. But it was interesting because I think Frank took on all of that. I think we as artists, we just want to make something cool, and we sort of felt this idea that like we were a little bit, I don't know if untouchable is the right word, but we felt like we could express ourselves and make something that we loved, and then other people would love it. But I think we learned that we needed to, it just turned into a lot of like listening to market sentiment. Frank spent a lot of time in spaces, getting a lot of feedback from a lot of different people. And every few days we had a different like objective or goal. And the character, I think in the end feels like something that was made in a lab, because it kind of was. Like it needed to fit a lot of criteria. Needed to be human, but not human. It needed to be relatable. It needed to be, it needed to be all of these things, because we felt like those were all of the parameters that are necessary to make a banger PFP. When like, not really a hot take, but I think like nothing does it better than a pixel, to be honest. Like pixel art makes the toughest PFPs, or something that creates that type of contrast. But anyway, yeah, it was a lot of work, a lot of ideation. Sorry, I went off the rails there a little bit.
You're good. Okay, so here's my question for you. So one of the things that was talked about a lot back then was people would always say like, well, why does the art take this long, right? And I think it was something that I think people who weren't there during the art process, I don't know if you ever can really appreciate the amount of hours that goes into it, right? And, I had the luxury of being able to go over to the house and kind of see sometimes what you guys were working on, and I would see the different iterations of the art over time, right? And it was, I think by the end of it, there was probably, I don't know, like six to eight different collections that you guys had successfully completed, right? And I think at times when you say that, there's somebody on Twitter who goes, cap. Like, there's no way they made 6 to 8 collections. Like, there's no way, right?
When we were in, so Candy and I, Frank decided that we needed help. So we called Pencils. Pencils like, I'll sleep on the fucking roof. Yeah, send me to the States. Pencils comes to the States. We're like, we don't need help. We got this. Luckily, Pencils is the fucking sweetest human being on the planet.
Love that man.
I would suggest that you get him on this podcast.
Well,
as soon as possible.
We got to get him back out to America.
We got to. He comes out, and the team has rented like a floor of the one hotel. They're going to do NFT NYC, and I was ready to like get Utes or Duppies at the time. I was ready to fucking be done, like, because we were supposed to do this other project. Duppies was going to just be for dust, right? Like it was a mint for dust, and I was like, I don't want dust. I want to make some money, and then I also want to get back to my own art. So I was like, there was two things. It was always like from the top, it was always like, we got to get this done in 2 weeks. Every 2 weeks we delay until 8 months happen. And I think that's a part of the reason why nothing really got incubated quite long enough. But we stayed behind to work on the collection. Me, Pencils, Candy, Blem stayed behind, and we made, between us, jamming like 75, 80 traits on a base that we had also improved in the process. Unbeknownst to us, Johnny went along on this trip to NFT NYC, and they were working on another base. So we like had stayed behind to try to finish the collection, and they come back and they're like, yo, we got a new base. And we're like,
fuck.
All right. Let's go. And then, yeah, I mean, then we did the like musical chairs of like, who's the art director. I remember like Johnny came back and it was like, Johnny was very much the leader at that point. He speaks Rohanese and he's also extremely talented. I never want to take that. Like Johnny's he's a goddamn unicorn. But, and then John Lay comes to the house. Johnny's not there that day. Frank's like, Matt's the creative director. And I was like, oh shit, creative director. And then, you know, John Lay comes on. John Lay's the creative director. And it was this thing where like way too many cooks in the kitchen. And like I said, like I'd started to get a little bit of an ego on me. I was like, I think I can do this. And I don't know why you're not listening to me. And I think each of us had a little bit of that in our own way. And that sucks. Like if I could go back, I would just like assume the role. I would probably just do the work and we probably would have got done just a little bit faster. But no, I probably would never do that, to be honest. Like I want to make shit that's meaningful to me and I want to make shit that has my fingerprint on it. And I don't want to spend 8 months executing on what isn't even someone else's vision. We were just making what we thought we absolutely had to make for the market to be perfect. Utes are cool. I want to make sure that like we say that, but like, you know, I ultimately left because I didn't see myself in the art in the end. Like the iterations that ended up being minted, like it's not what I would have made.
That's fair. That's fair. And I think the thing about it is when you hear that, it's like at the end of the day, there's so many talented people that were working on it, right? And I think like, you know, everybody from you, Johnny, Candy, Pencils, you know, John for a period of time, and it's like there's so many super talented people, and when you think about it, like most NFT projects are working with maybe 1 or 2 artists, right? And so and you don't have kind of that like Frank mind there too, right? And you know, and I think the thing about Frank that makes him special is he understands the ability to pivot and when you have to pivot, because this space changes so damn quick that if you don't pivot, you can also, you know, very much like ruin a project, right? And I think Frank understands, hey, you have to swallow your pride at some time and make changes. And I can also understand as an artist that like, hey, if you have somebody coming in who's a non-artist, and, you know, Frank's an artist in his own way, but he's not Absolutely. A, you know, an NFT project artist, right? And so I think when you have that person who comes in and says, hey, market sentiment is kind of changing in this direction, like we need to do this, and this change. And you as an artist, you're probably like, what the fuck? You know?
Yeah. I mean, like, it's just, it's more fulfilling to make something that is of your own. Like it's better. It's more fun to be vulnerable. I mean, it's riskier. It's more painful. It's scarier to be vulnerable and create something that is selfish self-expression, put it into the world and see what people think about it. But when it pays off, it's really satisfying. Like DeadGods for that reason was really satisfying. Like we poured heart and soul into that. Slimes are really satisfying. I pour heart and soul into that. Utes was like 30 different pivots that led to the best thing for the market. It was a design solution. Like Utes are designed. There's a distinction, I think, between like self-expression and art and design. And I think Utes are a well-designed PFP at the end of the day.
Yeah, fair. And it's, you know, I'll say as you know, obviously a holder of Utes, a holder of DeGods, like I appreciate the fuck out of all the work that you guys put in. And I feel like, again, I felt like for a long time, I was like, man, they're in a impossible situation to solve because like, and again, I don't think enough people kind of like zoom out a little bit and look at it of like, it was the most speculated thing in the entire NFT space. And you've got, you know, the Solana space in itself had never really crossed over into the like the ETH environment, and now all of a sudden all these ETH people are talking about Utes. Ute list like went so fucking bonkers, right?
Yeah.
And it was like it was a crazy time in the NFT space. And again, it's like you just have this really tough thing to figure out because again, if you put it out and for whatever reason it's not beloved like DeadGods was, then you've got a huge problem that you have to solve, right? And obviously we're seeing that right now with the season 3 art that like it did not have the same effect on people as the DeGod season 3 or their DeadGod art had, right? And so now it's the ability to pivot. Like, do you take what customer feedback do you listen to? What do you not listen to? That's a really difficult thing to also try to figure out. Like, again, that's the thing I hope everybody takes a second and understands with this NFT space. This shit's hard. It's really hard to know what to do.
It's brand new.
Yeah.
There's no fucking handbook for any of this.
No. And there's no history that you can look back on, and it's really, really hard. So I think a lot of times people can look at decisions that are made and go, well, in hindsight, I wouldn't have done that. And it's like, well, no shit. Like, hindsight's a beautiful thing. Like, it's easy to look at that and go, well, yeah, in hindsight, I would have done this, and this differently because of this, and this. But you have to go through that in order to learn that, right? And I think that's the part about it that, the different iterations, and like, obviously I got to see some of them, and I had my thoughts on like, oh, I think this one's really cool. Oh, that one I don't really fuck with as much. But then somebody else would look at it and go, oh, I really love that one, and I don't fuck with that one, right? And and it was so difficult to try to have everybody universally agree on something, right? And so, yeah, again, I'll say this, like, I appreciate all the work that you guys put in, and I do want to give you the floor to kind of just, obviously there was a lot of speculation back then in terms of like, does he like Frank? Does he not like Frank? That's half the reason why we fucking started off this podcast with that just clickbait. And then just, your overall thoughts on like the team in itself. I want to give you the floor to just address anything that you would like to clear up or anything along those lines. I know that's open-ended.
Yeah. No. I mean, I left the house not liking Frank, but we had just butt heads enough times, I think. And, the way things shook out wasn't that cool. But I will say him and I have had conversations since then that have reminded me what I love about Rohan. And this is the thing that I always go back to. And I really try not to like bear or harbor any resentment. It's just non-productive. But when you get glimpses of Rohan, that like fucking sweet guy that Rohan is, that like excitement and like passion for creating those moments, like you can't not love the kid. Like he's a great dude. When he's on his Frank bullshit, sometimes him and I don't jive, and I think that he would completely agree with that. Like, I was a fucking pain in the ass, and I would do it again the exact same way. Like I have a ton of appreciation and respect for him. I'm sure he'd say the same about me. And in terms of the team, like, man, like everybody is like more smart and funny than they have any business being. I learned a lot being with all of them. And I would never go back and work there again, but I'm really, really grateful for the experiences that I had, for sure.
You know what it reminds me of is like when I hear all of this, it reminds me of like Kobe and Shaq, like in a lot of ways of like, there was a solid period of time where they hated each other. And I think that's what like, and I'm not saying you guys hate each other now, but like I think when you're great at what you do and somebody else is great at what they do, it's so hard for that to be cohesive, because what makes you great is your own individual aspects of yourself. And then when you try to mold that with somebody else, it's really hard for that to fit seamlessly, right? And so I remember just like thinking about it all the time, like all the different things that you guys had to try to solve and everything like that. And I was like, man, that environment has to be crazy stressful, because it's a really, really difficult problem to solve. And again, when you have all these like very talented people, everybody has their own ideas. And so I don't know how you come up with the idea that ends up being the idea that wins out. And then when you do feel like, hey, I've got the idea, like I've got the banger idea, and then that idea ends up being the one that's not used, we're human, man. It's hard to not go like, what the fuck? Why was my idea not used there, right?
Yeah.
And I think we're seeing that too with season 3, right? Everybody goes on the timeline and they're like, I've got the idea on how to solve this, right? And it's like, but the hard part is we're looking at things of like them being black and white. It's not. There's a shit ton of gray area, right? And I think that's the thing that people have to take a step back and realize is that if this was easy, everybody would do it, right? Like, and you guys,
everybody tried.
Yeah, everybody tried. Everybody's gone on Twitter and they put out their ideas and things like that. But again, if it was easy, we would have already found the solution. Like this shit is tough, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of respect for Johnny and Candy. Like, they had to defend the floor with Apple pencils, and like they were fucked from jump because of the market. Like, that is a big part of this. No one has had a successful post art reveal pump except for DeadGods.
Right.
Like, in the history of NFTs, when have you seen an art reveal even a delayed reveal on mint, the floor tanks. Like as soon as speculation's over, the floor dumps because people are trying to get the rare one, or, you know, they were faced with an impossible task and they did a good job.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think they did a great job.
Yeah. I mean, it's, again, I don't envy the position that they were in. It is tough shit. And, you know, I know, again, everybody has their ideas in mind of like, you know, they should have done this, they should have done that. And it's like, it's hard to know what would have, you know,
yeah.
Could there have been anything that would have been done to like, that would have, you know.
Well, I mean, we were talking about this a little bit, but like, this is the evolution of like the NFT being the product to DeGods being the product, right? Like with DeadGods, art was the product. People traded and speculated on the intricacies, the aesthetics. Like people were literally just trading art for a long time. DeGods didn't have dust labs. It wasn't a tech company. It was a community, and people loved the art so much they were willing to pay fucking out the ass for it. I think this marks a maturation of DeGods, right? Like it, again, very much design. Like they forced the original art through an aesthetic filter and created this collection. And I don't think that I've seen what Candy draws like this, and I've seen what Johnny draws, like whimsical shit. Like they both have their own ideas and their own aesthetics. And it wasn't that, you know? And I think that what they made was a much more attractive floor and a much more cohesive product that can be the face of what they're creating, which is like community as a product, which is like this, this luxury brand, which, you know, luxury is experiencing its own bubble burst right now. But like, I think they're going to be fine because they do have to progress. They can't, I don't think you can justify $20,000 JPEGs on art alone in reality, like in objective reality that the rest of the world lives in. Unless it's attached to a legacy brand, a singular artist with a vision and a bunch of history or trajectory. But I think it's really difficult to do when it's an NFT project, when it's one of 10,000, you know, I think that they're moving in the right direction.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I agree. And I think again, it's like, we all have our ideas, you know, and I think that's what makes the NFT space special is there's so many people who give a shit, right? And I think that's the part about it that I love the most is like I've definitely butted heads with people over the last, you know, few months as everybody's got their ideas. Obviously, I had my video that went viral and people made their made some funny tweets around that.
Well, whatever you think you know.
You don't know shit.
Okay.
You don't know shit.
I thought so.
Yeah. I don't know shit. I mean, I think I was right. That's the biggest thing people don't talk enough about. I was right. Whatever you think you know, you don't know shit, including myself. That was just a part. That part should have been added, including myself. But, you know, I think like.
Disclaimer, Mark doesn't know shit.
I don't know shit. That's facts. That's facts. But you know, I think the thing that people have to keep in mind when it comes to all of this is that when we went from DeGod art to the DeadGod art, it was such a massive jump, you know, and that feeling was so crazy to watch, right? And I just don't think, I remember when I went over to the house at one point and Frank said to me, he's like, what are you expecting from season 3 art? And I was like, I don't have a great answer for you. I'm like, I don't know. Like, I'm like, you guys, like, I love my DeadGod, right? So I was like, I don't really know how you can make it better. Like, if I'm being honest with you, I don't really think you can create something that I'm going to love more. Like, I just don't think it's possible. And part of it is like the feeling that it gives me, right? And like, and it's something that's represented me for so long that I'm like, it'd be really hard for me to like love the DeadGod art more than, or the season 3 art more than the DeadGod art, right? But I was like, but I do like the idea of multiple versions of the same PFP. I think that's exciting, right? And to me, it reminds me a lot of sports cards, right? Like one athlete has multiple different types of cards of that same athlete. And I think that's cool because some people are going to prefer different designs over others, right? And I think that to me is something that, you know, when I think about NFTs a lot, I compare it often to the sports trading card world because I'm like, those are collector's pieces that people have put a huge value on and things that people have enjoyed for over 100 years, right? And so I'm like, with the NFT space, we have to get to the 100-year part of things. We got to get to 5 years, right? But you know, in terms of there's a lot to learn from the trading card world and how they've operated and how they've created things that still have value as time goes on and things like that. And, you know, how Pokemon cards now are more relevant than ever after they initially caught the boom in like whatever that would have been, like 96, right? Mm-hmm. And so, you know, there's a lot of parallels there. But again, I think it's just like we're in the NFT space where, to me, if you don't try shit, like you're doomed to fail. And so you have to try shit. And when you try shit, that means certain things are going to hit. That means certain things aren't going to hit. And I think the biggest thing the NFT space is learning right now, in my opinion, is how to communicate better when it comes to disagreement. Because right now it's like we're all down bad. Everybody. We've all turned into long-term holders. Whether you wanted to be or not, you're a long-term holder now, right? And I think as a result of that, everybody's got different opinions in terms of how do we get back to the bull market, right? When in reality, for the most part, we just have to buy time until we get to the next bull market, right? But with that, we need to grow and mature the space during that time. And that's what I think we're seeing right now is a lot of people, some of the random bullshit that was in the NFT space, I feel like now, you know, people are actually addressing like, hey, that's a dumb idea and here's why, right? And I do think we're sifting out a lot of the bullshit. We're sifting out a lot of the ruggers and grifters and everything like that. And now it's a lot of people who really want to see this space succeed and thrive and everything like that. And with that, you have a lot of opinions, right? And so it's just a very, very, very tough space to navigate. And everybody, I think, tries to simplify a very, very difficult problem to solve. And I think that's the part where everybody needs to take a step back for a quick second, breathe, and just understand, again, we're in completely uncharted territory. We've never been through an NFT bear market. And, like, if you think you know the idea, the solution, like, once again, you're trying to simplify a really complicated thing. None of us have the exact solution, but together, a lot of passionate people can help come up with the solution. We just need to do it in a more, I don't know, not, you know, nice way. Can we not be assholes on the timeline from time to time?
I mean, look, clickbait, negative clickbait sells. That's how you're going to get the most. That's how you're going to build your brand as an influencer.
That's why we started off this podcast that way.
You got to be a dick. I love being a dick. Just kidding. No, I like also like real talk. I mean, NFT projects by and large are dumb. Like they are not real. There was a boom. A lot of people got to make a lot of money and realized very quickly that if you don't already have a product, but you collect a bunch of fucking money from strangers and they immediately have instant access to you, and the only barrier to entry was your very low mint price to then have a seat at the table to give you feedback, and you're human, so you listen. Like, you bought yourself a job of providing short-term value to a bunch of fucking strangers on the internet. And the real mistake of NFT projects is that became the norm. We never got to a point where people were having very real discussions about how blockchain is bettering their business, or like how they're integrating it into, I don't know, fulfillment, or like tracking sales, or buying carbon credits, or like all of these like very real use cases that people are working on that just that aren't as sexy as an NFT. God, tell me why NFTs are sexy, but like there's going to be a period where people realize that like all of this was really silly. Like a lot of this is really silly. And I think the projects that make it through this bear market are the ones who start to try to be impactful communities by leveraging their community members. Like yourself, like any project with you attached to it, you're a value add, right? Like take good care of Marc, the DeGods boys, like anybody who's creating positive, solid, content, I think is somebody you take care of as a part of your community. And I think you have to be able to filter out the noise. Like just because you have 5,000 strangers that hold your project and you happen to have some money and they think you should do specific things with it, like no business ever has worked that way. You have 1 to 5 people with a very clear vision. You have a visionary. You have a fucking Steve Jobs. You have somebody who understands that like there needs to be core principles, a thesis, and a direction. And then those people work on it, and you hire people that are willing to work within those confines. You don't take every shareholder in a meeting and listen to them individually. You don't open up a Discord where they expect you to be active. You don't like open a fucking Twitter chat with everyone who owns a share of your company and then ask them for feedback all day long. Like that just never worked that way. And also, like you don't build a legacy brand in a year. Like you got to go through the shit. So I think like a lot of the NFT groups now that are experiencing this, like they're realizing that they have to pivot to something of more substance, something that is a little more tangible and makes sense to be invested in, or to like create revenue so that they can actually live, you know, for the next 10 years. I think they're going to be a new kind of business that is like probably very successful. And if DeGods can tap the luxury thing, I think it's absolutely the route to go. NFTs are a luxury item, right? Like, but like when the bull market comes back, I'm really interested to see like, what does an NFT project look like? Like how many people, like, cause you really, I think being anonymous as a founder is hopefully done, right? Like,
yeah, I hope so.
I
very
really,
much hope so.
It was so silly. Like it was very, like looking back at it, I thought it was so cool that people were anonymous. Like, you know, wear your balaclava in an interview. Like that's sick. You're so shadowy. But like at this point, like why the fuck would I give you money?
Yeah.
Why would I ever give you money? And then like, if I give somebody money, if I invest in somebody, like shout out Q, like with Lancer, I'm not checking every day when my, like, I'm not trying to pull my money out tomorrow. Like I'm banking on them for the next 5 years, building infrastructure on chain. That's how I want to place my money. Otherwise I'm just gambling. And that's what NFT projects are. And I think a lot of people have woken up to that. And I think a lot of founders also, speaking of communication, you just got to get real with your holders and really talk about what it is you're trying to do and start having a vision or a goal that extends beyond the next like hype cycle or the next like short-term pump.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's facts. I think when we think back, like there's so many projects that I bought in like, oh my God, dude, I could go to therapy to just address some of the NFT projects that I bought. And I think
I'm right here.
Yeah. Let's talk about it, man. Okay. So it's like, I think about some of the stuff I bought and why I bought it. And almost all of it, I was like, because some dumbass is going to buy this for more money than I just spent on it. And now who's the dumbass? Me. But I think the questions that we're starting to ask ourselves have gotten better, right? Like,
yeah, totally.
You know, why should I, you know, if a new project is minting, why should I mint this? Do you have an actual plan? What is this money going towards? What is the end goal? You know, who is the founder? What have they done previously? You know, are you willing to put your name and face out there, right? And, you know, and again, I do think, you know, I understood why some people wanted to be anonymous back then. I sort of kind of understood it. But the part about me that was frustrated is I was like, man, I just want to know who you guys are, because at the end of the day, like, yes, you're not a security and everything like that, but I want to just know who you are. I want to know if I'm buying this JPEG, like, who are the people that created it? Like, I just like being able to put a face with a name. You know, I like being able to hear the story about how these things were created and everything like that, because I think you start to appreciate it more, right? So,
yeah,
you know, I think, like, once again, when I hear the story of DeadGods, when I hear the story of Utes, and I realize how hard that was, it makes me appreciate the art more when I look at it, right? And so, to me, when you kind of remove the anonymous aspect of things and you can just focus on having genuine connection like this, it makes you appreciate things a lot more. And I think it also, again, removes a lot of the bullshit in the space, and you start to really ask yourselves again, like, what are these people doing? What are they building? How long is this realistically going to take? You know, and I think it just makes things a lot easier to understand. And so I think the space, I've said it countless times, but I think the space is really maturing. I think we've got a lot of really passionate people who
so
care.
Smart, passionate people.
I mean, that's the thing that keeps me here. Like, I go on Twitter and, like, yes, every once in a while somebody will say some batshit crazy stuff, but I'm like, at least they care. Like, they're here, they care. You know, it would have been much easier for them to leave already. And so they're still here. They're still doing their thing. They're still tweeting. They're still supporting. They're still retweeting this and commenting on this and whatever. And it's like, you know, like we are on the frontier of something that's so new and fresh, and like, and it's got problems, and we're working on solving those problems. And again, that, like, getting to the point of success, getting to the point of, like, NFTs truly, like, finding true market fit in the world and everything like that, dude, that's a bumpy ass journey. Like, I think a lot of people would love for you to come on the couch and talk about, well, whoa, I gotta pause on how I just said that.
Scum on the couch.
Scum on the couch. You know, I think a lot of people would like you to come here today and talk about, you know, DeadGods and Utes and go, Dude, it was fun as hell and it was easy, you know, but that's not the reality of shit. Like it's hard and it's, you know, and there's egos involved and it's tough shit. And like, again, all of this is fucking tough. Like if it was easy, we would have already figured all this out, but that's what makes it great, is that greatness is never easy, you know? And I think that's the part that I wish people would just take a step back and understand of like, we're trying to build something that has long-term value. And I want people, when they're looking at the history of NFTs 100 years from now, I want them watching shit like this. I want them hearing our conversations. I want them to understand what it took to get to where it's at, right? When we truly find how all of this solves itself and everything, I want them to see that journey to get there, and that journey's fucking hard. And so that's kind of what I hope people take away from all of this, is that growth is ugly, and growth can be frustrating and angry, and
it's nonlinear.
Yeah, and people want it to be, but man, like anything that just goes straight up is doomed to fail. Like
for sure,
you got to have some peaks and valleys and shit like that. You got to find the problems and solve those problems, and like that's how life goes, you know. So
we'll get there.
Yeah,
we'll get there. Some of these projects will be better. A lot will go away, which is great. It's a dub for all of us. I'm really interested to see. Like I'm really interested in. I get more interested in ordinals all the time. Get more interested in Bitcoin all the time. Like true, forever, provable on-chain provenance that is permanent. That's really interesting to me for art. Treating NFTs like shitcoins, like I think that can go on any chain. Really, I think Solana is probably the best for it. But I'm really interested in ordinals long term as sort of a time capsule. I think, you know, obviously Bitcoin is beautiful. Bitcoin's the inception. I mean, I played with the, like, what would it be like to just move everything to ordinals? It'd be really expensive to mint, but like it would be there. It would be there forever. As long as there's computers, there's going to be Bitcoin. I think that it's a really interesting direction. I don't know if you've toyed or fucked with ordinals at all, but
oh yeah.
And obviously ZK, shout out ZK.
ZK is a legend.
Dude, man, I had a meeting with him like just over a year ago or something. He was in his place in Miami, and he was like wanted to collaborate on his like GM photo thing, and I was like, that's kind of cool, I guess. And then like 6 months later, all my slimes changed their PFPs to fucking OMBs. He just like, dude, he found a new gear and he fucking went for it. Yeah. Also, shout out Tony. Yeah, they killed it.
Yeah, no, that was super exciting to watch. And again, it's like, that's the cool part about this space, is that it does change super rapidly, and like, you know, a meta can take power really quick, and all of a sudden something that people, you know, if you said to somebody in 2021, we're going to have Bitcoin ordinals at some point, they would have been like, what the fuck are you talking about? Right? Like, it's like, you know, again, that's why I think people need to take a step back and say, whatever you think you know, you don't know shit. Because again, this space changes so damn quick. So it's like, bruh, yeah, like I could have my opinion that I have today, and it could change tomorrow, because like new information comes into space so quick, right? So sure. It's just, I think, again, we just have so many passionate people here, and I think we all just have to understand that like the space is ever evolving, and our opinions are going to change, and that's just something we have to embrace, you know? So
yeah.
What I want to get into from here is, and dude, I appreciate your transparency and all of this. You know, I think people are going to be really interested to hear, you know, a super vulnerable conversation about all of this. And again, I appreciate all the work that you put in and everybody else put in on all of this art. And again, you guys were faced with some impossible challenges, and you guys kicked ass. So I know it was I know it was stressful as hell. So again, as a holder, I appreciate all the shit you guys did. So with that, so I want to get into my slimes and online time and everything like that. So walk me through, like, what was the reason why you decided to create those? I know you had talked about when you were in Lisbon, just, you know, kind of going through and drawing out everything and kind of coming up with those parameters that you wanted to stay within. And so, yeah, walk me through, I guess, how does that go from, you know, drawing in a van there to getting to where we're at now?
I'd conceptualized Maquina Muertes in March of last year, and I think, as we talked about in the beginning, me finding my artist voice in this environment has been interesting, right? Like going from making derivative artwork of DAA to working with a team and seeing how a team executes on a vision, all the while knowing that I wanted to sort of have my own creative vision. I wanted something that felt sincere and part of me, but also something that I knew I could go really deep on. So I'm Mexican American, mom's white, my dad's Mexican. I grew up in Tucson, Arizona. Considered a border town. We have we bump up with the border in a lot of different ways. Tucson has a UNESCO designation. It has the oldest known location of agriculture in North America. And obviously the Mexican influence is heavy. I have a huge Mexican family. My dad's one of 9. And as an adult, I've volunteered with some groups. There's a group on the border called No Mas Muertes, and they deal specifically with border crossers and people who are being held at the border who are trying to immigrate. And, at some periods, it's a lot of Venezuelans. Sorry, this is close enough. But usually it's Mexicans who've been captured who are trying to cross the border. I volunteered with a group called Samaritans, and their goal is to merely provide human aid to people who are trying to cross the border. So what people don't realize is that the border has always been protected. The wall was stupid. There has been, basically a second army at the border forever. But the way that they've positioned themselves is to only protect the spaces that are easiest to cross, essentially leaving open the most dangerous areas to cross. So every year, migrants cross at the rockiest, hottest, worst times of the year to cross and die a lot. So what Samaritans do, the only thing they do is one gentleman or a group of gentlemen using GPS mapped all of the migrant trails on the border and found out where most of them converge or the places where they converge most often and created water drops. So as a Samaritan, you just go out and you drop water. What Border Patrol does is slash water bottles. And if you're found leaving water, it's considered baiting or abating migrant. It's illegal. But there's been tons of studies. We don't have to get too far into it. It's been a big part of my life watching the relationship of the United States and Mexico. And as somebody who's half white and half Mexican, I've never really belonged anywhere. I'm the Mexican kid to my white friends. I'm the white kid to my Mexican friends. And I live in this reality where I'm near the border and I lived through the Trump presidency, bad hombres, whatever. I see the reality. I visit Mexico a lot. If you're doing normal person shit, nothing abnormal happens to you for the most part wherever you go. If you're doing sketchy shit in sketchy places, just like in the United States, sketchy shit's going to happen. It may be a little more violent there, but it could be just as violent here. Let's not fucking split hairs. Also, sorry, I'm on my soapbox now.
Yeah, go for it.
I also being a part of food service, I visited farms we have a lot of farm where I'm from. I'm from Picture Rocks, just outside of Tucson. There's a lot of farmland in Marana. But I visited Monterey, California, which provides produce for a lot of the country. And every single fucking person who works in agriculture on the field picking your fruits and vegetables is Mexican. It's a migrant worker, whether they're legal or not. The idea that Americans could feed themselves is fucking laughable. They're literally the most hardworking people working here seasonally for a little bit of money to send home. And the relationship that Americans have in places like fucking Vermont, which is apparently where most of Border Patrol come from, don't have a clue where their food's coming from, who's picking it for them, and who is on our border. There's real people who are trying to get here just to work so they can send money home. And I think that it's just been an interesting thing to observe as, who I am. So all of that to say, I wanted an opportunity to have a voice that felt like I wanted to represent Mexican culture in a way that felt genuine to me. So I have a lot of really chola cousins and I grew up around, when I was in high school, I hung out with the Mexicans because it was the Mexicans or the white boys. My best friend was white kid from Texas, but at school I hung out with all the Mexicans. And that's just kind of been my life and how I've navigated through it. I think it's always been like sort of one or the other, and I wanted an opportunity to combine them. So in order to do that in a way that I felt was respectful, was I did a lot of research, and I went as far back as I could. And I have a small library now on Aztec imagery, the codices, hours of podcasts on Olmecs and how it's a cradle civilization, and how those spread to Maya and Aztec. And the majority of the mythology that I pull from is Aztec, but that's why we have axolotls. That's why I'm doing work with axolotls. They're named after Axolotl, who's a sibling of Quetzalcoatl. It's a whole thing. But in doing all of this research, I wanted to create a PFP collection of essentially like these like masked warriors, right? And the luchador mask represents the warrior's mask. So there are all of these characters who wear luchador masks who, when I created my character, he was this like stoic, tough guy. And I felt like I was never that, but I felt like I wanted to be that. And so he became sort of my spirit animal. And I wanted to create these spirit animals for other people where we could come together on subject matter that either you identify with or you're interested in. Like, you don't have to be of the culture to really to admire the aesthetic or be interested in the story or where it's going. So that's Slimes. That's where all the aesthetic is coming from in my lived experience. But then Maquina Muertes is, it's probably the most exciting part of it is when I complete Slimes, I'll really devote more energy into Maquina Muertes. But they are these big scenes. I kind of start them with no real end goal in mind, usually not even with like an original idea. I just start drawing and I start pulling things together and creating these compositions. The goal will be eventually to bring a story through all of these images, and they're pretty fantastical. They're epic in scale. They're really intricate. And what I want to do is have my character meet other slimes in this story that hits all of these story points as represented by Maquina Muertes. So there'll be a lot of filler in between these things, but these will be sort of like crescendos or beats within the story itself. So that's kind of the larger vision, the longer goal. I would, of course, love to do a graphic novel. I'm not quite fast enough, but I'll get there. Like I said, I'm a long ways from where I want to be. But in the meantime, we have All in Time, which is a really exciting outlet. There we go. It's a really exciting outlet for me because I won't pretend to be when people start talking about fashion, I start feeling inadequate very quickly. I grew up poor as shit. Like, I always wanted the nice shoes. I was telling my girlfriend about this earlier, but do you have fat farms when you were younger?
Oh, I didn't have them, but plenty of kids did. Yeah.
I had fat farms. I was fortunate enough. I talked one of my parents into buying me fat farms, but a lot of my friends would go to the swap meet and get the fat farms with the backwards P's or the Adidas with the upside down Adidas. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So, and then I was a rock climber for like a decade. So it was like I was Patagonia dad for a while. I was just like, if it worked and it lasted a long time, that's what I wore. But I've always I had a little clothing line when I was 20. Me and a group of friends would sell clothes at the swap meet. We had a screen printing setup, but I've always wanted to revisit it. I've always, as long as I can remember, wanted to make a toy, like whether it's an action figure or vinyl sculpture or whatever. So All in Time is just going to be where when I have ideas that are related to or associated with slimes or the Maquina Muertes universe, or it's just something I think is dope, that's where it will be. It'll fall underneath the All in Time brand. So like I'm working with this dope dude CK Studio on some 3D modeled ashtrays that we're probably going to cast in concrete. I'm working with a little homie, we'll announce it later, on a sculpt of a toy, working on more clothes. Obviously Wetico just did a recreation of one of the slimes as a companion to a slime. I want to do more collaborative stuff with other makers in the space and release it underneath the All in Time brand. So it feels like a lot, but it's really all moving in one direction, and anybody who buys in gets to be along for the ride. And I think that's what's really exciting. And I think that's what makes NFTs exciting, and why you would collect something in the first place is like the story's not over on mint day. Like it's really just starting. And I think that's why I get excited still. And it's also a really easy way to like track and drive value to people in, I gotta be careful how that's worded, but I mean, like, it's really easy to track people who own one of your NFTs because it's all on chain. It's really easy to gift that person something or provide them access to something that no one else can have. And those are, to me, are the most exciting ways to leverage the technology. Otherwise, like, you know, I'm trying to grow this brand outside of the Solana ecosystem as quickly as I can.
100%. No, dude, I'm super excited to see the whole journey that you guys go on with Slimes and All in Time and everything like that. And dude, I mean, it's just been, again, it's been super fun to just watch your journey as an artist and like see where it's going. And man, I have such appreciation for you as a talent and everybody in the ecosystem and everything like that. So I'm very much excited to see where it goes. It's going to be, dude, it's going to be a movie. So,
Thanks, man.
So here's where I want to go from here. So I know you and I could chat for another probably 2 hours, but you know, this podcast we're probably already coming up close to, and I think we're at like an hour and 50 somewhere along those lines. So here's where I want to, kind of wrap things up. So for yourself, you know, going through everything that you've gone through in the last, 2 years of going from, working with companies on branding and graphic design and everything like that to kind of getting into, putting out your own art and fan art essentially, and then starting to drop your own collections and your own pieces and people really loving that and getting behind that. And then going from that to getting into the team atmosphere and working in collaboration with other artists to now dropping All in Time and dropping Slimes and everything like that. What have you learned the most about yourself in the last 2 years? And I know that's hard to sum up, and I'm asking a broad question here, but I would love you to just take a quick second and just think back about yourself as a human and kind of how you've grown and changed and evolved over the last 2 years as an artist and as a person.
I think probably one of the most surprising things is, I can't say that this is the answer, but something that comes to mind is, after my experience working in LA, just experiencing sort of a culture mecca, like where people come to congregate for culture, experiencing affluence like I'd never experienced before, experiencing people who are tapped into different scenes and seeing the sort of like competitive nature of show business, seeing what it's like to be in a mansion or whatever. What I realize is I miss Tucson and I miss rock climbing. Like, I realize that I'm much more fucking simple than I think I am. Like, growing up without that shit, of course, I've always wanted it, like I want a fucking G-Wagon and I want a chain and a grill and I want to be cool as shit. At least I want to be perceived that way, but after I got to experience a lot of different things, it was just it was a nice wake-up call that like the person who I more closely identify with and the person who I want to be was who I was being. And I think if this opportunity had happened at any other point in my life, I don't know that I would have seen it as clearly as I do now. So yeah, what I've learned about myself is I'm pretty fucking simple.
Fair. No, that's facts, dude. I mean, definitely, I feel that same way. Like, as much as I love LA, and there's certain aspects of it that I will always love, I do love when I get to leave here for a little bit and get back to a more like simple lifestyle and get back to gas prices being $3 and and things like that. So yeah, it's nice. I was at like a farmer's market in Charlotte, North Carolina a few weeks ago, and I was like, man, this is nice. This is very simple, and I enjoy this. And there's always aspects of it that I love here, but definitely good to.
Totally.
I'm like you, man. A little bit more simple than a lot of the aspects of LA.
Yeah, man. It just gets so noisy. But like, I don't know. There's certain things that are here and nowhere else. Like my fucking girlfriend. As soon as we come here, we got to go to Erewhon.
Oh, dude, facts.
Don't tell on me.
Which smoothie does she get?
She always gets a Haley Bieber. I got the cactus plant for flea market yesterday, which like my smoothie artist is on another level. They should be making NFTs or something.
Facts.
It was the most beautiful smoothie I've ever seen.
Isn't it? Truly incredible. Truly incredible. Oh man. Yeah, no, that's there's so many people who are gonna listen to that and go, I don't know what the fuck they just talked about, but
that's the most pretentious grocery store on the planet, and it's worth it.
Yep, come to LA, drop $18 on a smoothie, and then they ask
22.
And then they ask for a tip. That's the craziest shit. It's like, hey, you just dropped 20 something. You just dropped a Solana on a smoothie, and they want a tip on top of that. Crazy.
Worth it.
But worth it. Yep, facts. So okay, So if there's an aspiring artist that's listening to this right now, again, I know super broad, but what would be the biggest piece of advice that you would give to somebody else who's starting off right now? Maybe they've been working in graphic design previous to this, but they wanna finally start putting out their own pieces. What advice would you give them?
Make friends. Spend more time showing people your art, talking about your art than selling your art. I think it's really important that you're able to talk about your art, or you're creating something that is inspiring to you or was inspired. I think what I see a lot more now with new artists coming in the space is that they're looking for the silver bullet, or they're looking for the trend, or they're oftentimes just trying to recreate things that they see work. And I don't blame them. Like, if you're a digital artist at any other point in history, you're a gun for hire. Like, you're making art for somebody. That's how you sell. That's how you make money. And you get put in this environment where if you make art you can eat, then yeah, you're going to do what works. But I will say, like, from the perspective of a collector and from somebody who has collectors, like, have something to talk about and do more interacting and more connecting than selling art. And like, cold DMs to sell art is like it's tough. It's tough. I wouldn't do that. I would say, like, join a community, whichever one you have the means to join. Many are free or near free, and talk to people. And if you're going to DM somebody, say more than "Hey, bud."
Yeah, that's facts, man. I hate when somebody just slides in, "Hey." I'm like, just ask, I know you got a question, just ask it. Like,
Yeah, it's a pet peeve of mine. And when someone texts me, "Hey,"
yeah,
just say the fucking thing.
same. Or if somebody says, "Can I ask you a question?" Motherfucker, you just asked me a question. Just ask the fucking question.
This is 2 steps more than it needs to be.
Like, and if my answer's no, well then I'm just gonna say no next time. Actually, you know what? Fuck it. Next time somebody says, "Can I ask you a question?" I'm just hitting them back. No. Okay. All right. So 2 last things. One, do you have any like big personal goals or business goals for yourself over the next year?
Yes. So I've actually been doing a lot of goal setting lately. In the next 6 months, for the next 6 months, I plan to start exploring what Ethereum looks like as a ecosystem for artists who is there, who I think might be interested, just start to make inroads in the ETH space. Like, I feel like it's whenever anybody talks about going to Ethereum from Solana, someone wants to burn them at the stake. But I really think that the future, it wouldn't make sense if the future wasn't multi-chain. First of all, like, the idea that me as an artist am tied to a chain to determine my value is fucking asinine. Like, I can take it off chain and be just as valuable. Fuck off. Like, I really think that in order for me to grow, I need to be introduced to different and more audiences. And also, I think that being on Ethereum will force me to grow in different ways. So over the next 6 months, I'm planning to see how I can put myself on ETH in a more intentional way, whether through foundation or if I can get approved super rare. And then beyond that, all in time, I have like a pretty secure. I'm pretty secure in like what my next few drops are going to be. So I'm fleshing those out. I plan to finish Slimes by 50. Whether or not that's in the next 16 weeks or it's over the next maybe 5 months, like, obviously it would be nice to feel a market that is bullish again, but I'm really excited to begin expanding on all in time. So the cadence of Slimes, I'm not sure. I'm not in a rush to finish it, and I'm really just more in a rush to get good people in who are excited about the project and are excited about growing with me. We are planning a trip, just Slimes, to Mexico City next year in April. We're going to do cooking classes, go see a luchador match, go see the axolotls in Lake Xochimilco. I won't drink. We'll go see the axolotls in Lake Xochimilco. Good segue. We've raised like $30K for axolotl preservation. Next month, I'm going out to Mexico City to visit with a muralist. Her name is Gio. She's friends with every muralist in Mexico City. She's a really great connection. Her, my friend Ben Wong from Canada, and my friend Casson Trenner from the States, we're all working on this thing together. We're going to create 12 sculptures of axolotls and place them in different areas around Lake Xochimilco, which is the last known habitat of axolotls. They're under like 1,000 population in the wild right now. They're very, very, very endangered. And we're ideating on how to integrate blockchain with that experience. Ideally, it's some form of donation funnel, but it'll probably be like a free mint if you tap an NFC or something like that. We're working that stuff out. But yeah, that was a lot. That was plenty. We had a lot going on.
That's sick. I'm pumped, dude. I appreciate you and everything you do for the space and everything you're doing for Mexican culture and everything like that, man. And it's really cool to just learn more about your journey. And again, like it's people like you of why I'm bullish on this space, because it's gonna be really, really fun to watch. You've already done so well in the last 2 years, and the next decade is gonna be even more fun to watch. So, dude, I'm looking forward to just being a spectator for a lot of that. But man, yeah, just very, very excited for you and everything that you're working on, and all of that stuff is incredible. Like it's more than just art, like you're bettering the world, and that's very, very cool to hear all about that. But I have one last question for you, and this comes from our boy Scuba. This is the most important question of the podcast. I'm just gonna read this one. So he said to me, it's very important that you ask him how he makes a PB&J sandwich. Is it PB on a bread, J on the other, smash it together? Do you go PB on bread, J on top of PB, then second bread? Do you have another style that we just don't know about? Also, is there a reason why Steve is asking this question? I have so many questions, but first off, how do you make a PB&J sandwich?
Okay. It's very simple. You apply just a little bit of logic, right? I think. So rock climbing, I've probably had 1,000 PBJs. If you put J on a piece of bread and put it in your pack, at the end of the day, you just have bread soaked with J. And you don't get to taste all that J. And you really want to taste the J. So as a, we'll call it a seal, you PB both sides of the bread, right? You essentially make them waterproof, and then you put a little pile of J in the middle of one bread, and you lay it on top, right? And then it'll spread itself evenly in the sandwich, and it'll stay J and not soaked up bread with J in it.
I'm gonna be honest, that I'm 30, almost 31 years old. That's the most perfect solution to a PB&J I've ever heard of.
And this really only applies if you need shelf life, you know?
Yeah,
like if you're going to eat it immediately,
none of this matters. But if you are going to go rock climbing, that is how you make a PB&J.
I mean, if you're going to go on
last.
a fucking hike and you want to eat it
or
later,
picnic, yeah,
in 10 minutes, all right, you're going to get J inside your B.
What a way to end this podcast episode. Dude.
Speaking of JB.
Yeah, speaking of JB, where's
motherfucker?
Yeah. Oh my God, the out-of-pocket questions he wanted me to ask. Can't ask any of that. No.
NSFW.
Yeah, for sure. That's got to be in the Only Scum website.
Yeah.
So, with that, drop your socials. Where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at ScumSoul.
Not Scum.
Don't-
not just
you-
not.
when
Do
you
not
start-
go to just Scum.
Type Scum, keep going. SOL. You're good. I'm on Instagram as well at ScumSoul. Those are the two places as of now. I'm probably not going to go beyond those two, to be honest. That's enough social media for one man.
Not good.
We do have a Discord. Hop in, say hi. I hang out there a lot. I do streams every Friday. Last week we had Calder Moore. I've had Tanniker. We've had a bunch of legends in the space. I just bullshit with them while they draw because they're all amazing.
There we go. Well, dude, I appreciate you coming on. This was a lot of fun, and yeah, man, we'll run this back at some point, I'm sure. And but dude, keep crushing, keep doing what you're doing, and excited to see the journey.
Thanks, man. Appreciate you.
No problem, brother. Well, hey, everybody else, thank you guys for tuning in. Appreciate you guys. We'll talk to you guys soon. See you guys.